Welcome, everyone. I'm Dick Deming, Medical Director of Mercy One Cancer Center and the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It's brought to you in part by a grant from the Iowa Oncology Society. And our guest today, Lucas Nelson. He is the president of Bud and Mary's, and our topic is medical cannabis. And Bud and Mary's, as we will learn tonight, is the place that makes medical cannabis for the state of Iowa. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here. We met earlier today. I had the great pleasure of getting a tour of your facility, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's get to know you first as a person. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Indiana, a town called Evansville, but I've been in Des Moines now for, almost a decade, since 2017.
Okay. And how big of a high school did you go to?
Let's see. I was one of about 180 in our class, but my high school was actually pretty small. We only had about 600 people.
Okay. And what was your claim to fame in high school in Indiana?
Let's see. I would have to say I set about 4 of our school's records in swimming. Now I think they have since fallen, but at least at that time, that was pretty cool.
So you went to state.
I did.
Good.
Did not do very well from there. So
what was
my swim career ended.
What was your best event?
I actually swam the individual medley, so all 4 together. Yeah.
Okay. And then where'd you go to college?
So I started at James Madison University, graduated from there with an undergrad in accounting, and then moved to law school directly after that, and graduated from Indiana University with my legal degree.
Did you swim in college?
I did not. I thought about walking on, and I've realized that practice was 12 months a year, and figured this was the time. This was the time to call it.
What was your major in undergrad?
Accounting.
Okay.
Yes.
But you went right on.
Right in law school. Yep, right after I graduated in May and started law school in the fall.
Okay. And you're president of Bud and Mary's, which is it proper to say it's a division of Kemin, or it's a completely
closely
separate?
Associated? It is completely separate, and we have to mostly for some banking and financial type reasons, but we still get to lean on them for all of their knowledge as well.
Yeah. And for those who might not know, how would you describe Kemin Industries?
Yeah, so Kemin is a global ingredient manufacturer. It's based here in Des Moines. My grandparents founded it back in the 60s, back in 1961. And it has grown into a quite large, about 4,000 employees around the world. And at the heart of that business is extraction of molecules from plants, turn those into something else.
Yeah.
And at bottom, set the stigma aside from our current cannabis discussion. That is exactly what we're doing at Bud and Mary's as well.
Right. And obviously why that company was the right company to be able to do something like this. So back to Kemin, what are some of the products that the extracted botanicals are used in?
Yeah. So one of the most common ones, if anyone has a companion pet at home, if you have fed your dog or cat, and basically any brand of dry food out there, your pet has consumed a Kemin molecule. Mostly what we're doing there is preservatives, natural preservatives, and then the actual flavoring. So the reason it tastes like a chicken liver or something like that is from a Kemin molecule. But we also touch human food, and for instance, molecules in Mission tortillas and McDonald's hamburger buns. And one of the other big popular ones that really put Kemin on the map is a vitamin called lutein, which that is for helping to prevent age-related macular degeneration. So discovery that Kemin made back in the 90s and has really been a big product for it over the course of time.
And do you actually grow different plants all over the world?
Sure do. Kemin is, in fact, the largest or second largest marigold grower, one of the largest oregano growers in the world, and do it in different parts of the world, depending on the climate, obviously. But all of that is done with genetics that have been developed through traditional breeding from the crop team, and then those are passed over to the actual business unit to grow and then extract those molecules from to make the actual end product.
Right. And so, thanks for going through that history because it explains why came in and then created Bud and Mary's and is ideally suited for that with all the different scientists and botanists and, you know, ag chemical experts.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been a really nice feature of our business to have that expertise at our disposal.
Yeah. And your company is called Bud and Mary's, and that's the name of Grandpa and Grandma,
It
right?
sure is. It was just too perfect
Yeah.
not to use. Was their real names? And our company is really meant in part to represent and honor some of their legacy. But at the same time, it obviously has some meaning within the cannabis
Mhm.
space, so that's fun too.
Yeah. And so I knew your grandparents, what just wonderful, lovely, caring, generous people. And they started the company in the 60s and probably had no idea how big that was
No
going to
clue.
grow.
No, I think you go back to some of the history around the founding, and here, my dad will talk about growing up, and you come home from school, and then they were organizing pieces of paper, or they were stuffing envelopes that were, original mailers to go out to potential customers. I mean, it was a full family affair.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump forward to, was it 2017 when the Iowa legislature created the law, passed the law, signed into effect by Governor Branstad, that made medical cannabis, um, started the
Yeah.
whole process here in Iowa. Maybe give us a little history of how that came about.
Yeah. So one of those things that was definitely a bit controversial at that time, and was able to get it over the hump really with the help of a couple people who were going to be closely connected to the result, and then, namely some folks that had patients or would become patients, some people that really would have benefited from having this in our state. And we were able, I mean, through grassroots efforts to be able to get that over the hump, get it in front of Governor Branstad at the then Governor Branstad, and he signed it into law in July. Went through the rulemaking process over the summer, and then they opened up applications in the fall, and that's when we applied. Put all sorts of stuff together about how you were going to run your business, maintain quality, maintain security and the like, make sure you're going to conform to all the rules. And we were fortunate enough to earn that license. And then we were responsible at that point for building everything out over the course of most of 2018. And the law required us to be on dispensary shelves, which were also authorized under that same law by December 1st of 2018. That was the first day we opened. I was one of the guys driving products around the state. We made it literally the night before. We were delivering at about 9 p.m. on the 30th of November, but hey, we made it, and we've been off to the races since.
And when you started, how many dispensaries did Bud and Mary's have?
So we've maintained the same two that we have here in Windsor Heights, and then we have one in Sioux City as well. Those are two of the five that are authorized. A couple of the others have changed. So one is in Council Bluffs, one is in Waterloo. That one's been there from the beginning. And after a company that had earned them around the first time, so back in 2018, actually gave them back to the state because their business was sold and they decided they didn't want to participate in Iowa, actually moved that to Iowa City. And so Iowa City is the fifth location. Those are the only five around the state at this point in time, but that's all that's allowed under the law.
Right. So the law is really kind of opening the door a little bit, but it hasn't really fully expanded it in a way that probably would be beneficial for patients who live in different parts of the states when you only have five dispensaries in the entire state. Is the one has the most sales?
Windsor Heights would certainly be the busiest. That probably makes sense. And in fact, the five of them really track based on how big those communities are. Iowa City seems to be the next busiest. Again, it's not the one we run, but it seems to be. But you've also got the biggest population of those. And I think we see, or at least anecdotally, it seems more people from Cedar Rapids, for instance, are going to Iowa City rather than Waterloo for whatever reason that may be.
So let's get a little bit technical because there's other products now, and it's really kind of confusing because some states have recreational and medical. Technically, we only have medical.
Mm-hmm.
And the plant that I saw growing What do you refer to that plant as?
Yes. So we would refer to that as cannabis or as marijuana. Typical names that people are used to, of course. There are some other distinctions out there, as you're referring to. I could start with medical versus the adult use side or the recreational
Yeah.
side in other states. The process there is going to be very, very similar, if not identical, in any of these other markets. We do operate in some other states beyond Iowa, and whether it is a medical plant or a recreational plant, whether it is a product that is medical or recreational, it's actually treated the same way under those laws. And I think that's actually a good thing. And the point being is that for the most part, the states across the nation that have put these programs in place usually started with medical, and then eventually added a recreational or adult use program. But knowing that things like the testing requirements, the tracking requirements, even the way that the state regulators inspect, it's all based on the way those medical programs develop. No one is really able or would be incentivized to cut a corner for an adult use or for a recreational type product. What we see in most of the states now at this point is that the difference is on potentially on taxes. So typically in most states, medical is going to be taxed less or maybe not at all. The recreational adult use side is going to have an additional tax on it. And then you might see different purchase limits or THC limits within some of the products that are available.
But back to the manufacturing. So this is a very secure site, but it's also very clean and sterile. So if you do the tour, you have to put on a jumpsuit so that you don't bring any bacteria or viruses into the growing space. It's kind of like what I would imagine Pioneer Hybrid growing plants and engineering plants and extracting the chemicals. It's all very, very precise science, and you have a super high quality control. And every step along the way, you also have to sort of assess what the product is, correct?
Exactly.
In terms of concentration.
Yeah. So, everything starts, especially in the grow, with us controlling the environment around us. We don't want things getting into our cultivation space that could potentially impact the plant, whether that's from its own performance or the fact that these plants will suck up a lot of the things that are in it, the nutrients or that are applied to it. So we've got to be very careful. We maintain a safe environment, a clean environment, so we don't get in a situation where we have to apply a pesticide or something like that. And then as we go through the process, there are multiple stages for testing that is all required by the law that formed this program. That's at the finished oil point and then also at the finished product point. So we've got multiple checkpoints along the way. And that's to say nothing of the fact that we could be inspected at any moment, that we have pretty significant tracking requirements. And essentially everything we're doing is also on camera at all times, which is, again, another safety measure for sure, another quality measure, certainly making sure there's not diversion and things, obviously. But all of those points really go towards we've got to be very, very careful and precise. And we know at the end of the day, folks we're serving are dealing with, some pretty tough conditions. And so we want to be able to put the safest, cleanest product out there for them.
Right. So it's like creating any sort of medical product, very high quality control. It's not like a garden out in the middle of a cornfield where it's just kind of letting nature take over.
Correct.
And I asked you, what do you call your plant? Because then I want to talk about hemp. And what is hemp, biologically? Is it the same genus and species? It just has a lower concentration of THC. What is hemp? And then why can we buy hemp products anywhere, but we can only buy medicinal cannabis products at one of the 5 dispensaries?
Yeah, it's a confusing space out there. And I mean, I work in this every single day, and I still scratch my head sometimes at why our country and lawmakers have set it up this way. But hey, it's the playing field. So hemp is essentially the same plant as anything that we're growing that I just referred to as cannabis or as marijuana. The distinction really comes at the concentration of THC. That is a legal definition as opposed to anything that is different about the plant. So when you're growing a hemp plant, and if you're working under one of the hemp programs across the country that are authorized and legal in all 50 states, what you're going to see from those plants that are being produced are that they are going to have a much, much smaller concentration of THC. The amount there that's allowed is 0.3% by dry weight. So it comes down out of the field, it's been harvested, it's been dried, and you can't have more than 0.3% THC. Now, what the federal government passed the law back in 2018 that allowed for hemp to thrive across the country. What they hadn't predicted or thought through, or maybe they didn't ignored it, whatever it may be, was what was going to happen after this material came out of the ground. The original plan with hemp was looking at a couple different things. Fibers, and that goes in everything from ropes to dashboards and cars, all sorts of different hemp plastics and types of things like that. Folks can grow for hemp seeds, and then the last was for some of the other molecules in the plant besides THC, namely the one that's most popular is CBD. So that all started in 2018. Plants went in the ground in 2019. And there was kind of this big, some of you may remember, but it's kind of this big uptick in popularity with CBD itself. Well, pandemic hits, and people probably overgrew for where the demand was going to go. And some wise scientists started looking at this and were able to apply some chemical processes that actually convert CBD into THC. So you had this situation where you had hemp plants being grown across the country, all sorts of CBD sitting around with not necessarily a market for it. What are we going to do about that? Boom, we can convert it into THC. And the good and bad of that is, yes, it might have allowed for some of these products to reach market and do something with all this plant material. The bad part is it is not still today as regulated as what we see inside a medical or a recreational program. In Iowa, what happened was that the Iowa legislature chose to put a hemp program in place. They then, a couple of years ago, put what's now called the consumable hemp program, and that allowed for the most part, out-of-state production of finished products. And so if you've seen drinks or gummies or the like, any grocery store, gas station, nutritional type shops all over both the city and the state, those are almost all going to be derived from hemp. You might have some bad actors out there, but for the most part, those are going to be derived from hemp. And in Iowa, what you're going to see is that there are limits on THC on the product basis. So, for instance, you can't have more than 4 milligrams in a 12-ounce drink. Can't have more than 4 milligrams, 10 milligrams in a gummy package. So they've put some different limits there. You see something like that in some other states. You don't in other states. It becomes this pretty confusing minefield to navigate. What we will typically say and help separate is that you've got a precise regulator looking over the shoulder of us, of the other operators, and that's true in any of these other medical and adult use programs. There really isn't a singular body looking over the top in these hemp programs. Some states are doing better than others, but for the most part, there's there's holes you could drive a truck through on that side of things.
Couple of questions.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about CBD. CBD has some properties, and you veterinarians for medical marijuana sell products that have a combination of THC and CBD in different proportions, and we'll talk about that. But the CBD is of value, but you said you can take the hemp CBD and make THC. Is the THC that you make from hemp CBD chemically identical to the THC that you extract from your plants?
It is. Once you get to that molecular level, it is identical. Now, the problem that happens, of course, is when you subject it to this process, there are other constituents that can form. And some folks out there, I think, are very good at trying to isolate that molecule, THC, and making sure that they basically purify everything else around it. But that costs money. It takes time. It takes expertise. Not everyone is doing that.
Right.
And so that's where you run into some of these potential problems that, okay, you went through this process to end up with a THC from hemp. what else might be there? What other constituents might you see? And that's where you can run into an issue that isn't going to be or shouldn't be present on the medical or adult use side.
Whereas the plants that you have were bred over time to have a high concentration of THC, and that's a naturally occurring product of the plant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, we know precisely within the scope of our testing rules what we have to test for and what is going to be looked for by the third party lab. And all that has to be declared and tested against.
And you described that if you're buying a recreational, there's a limit to how much THC can be in the product. Is there a limit in how much THC can be in the product for medical marijuana?
So in most states, there might be a far upper limit. It's usually on something like a gummy or another type of edible. Within our program here in Iowa, you don't see limits on the actual product. We can put as much or as little THC in any product we feel is necessary or makes sense for what we're trying to do with that. In Iowa, the limit is on how much you can purchase over a period of time. The baseline is 4.5 grams of THC over 90 days. That works for right now, roughly 85% of our patients. But we do have around 15%, this is program wide across the state, that are able to obtain a waiver from their provider that can give them a little bit more.
Right. And as someone who fills out the forms, I'm aware of that. So really with that waiver, there's very few people that can't purchase the amount they need.
Correct.
Is it true that there's no limit or regulation on the CBD?
True. There is no limit there. The only thing our state is worried about tracking and making sure that we don't exceed those limits, whatever they may be set by a provider, is the THC.
The THC,
content.
yeah.
Yep.
So now we're talking CBD and THC. Are there any other active ingredients in your products besides THC and the CBD?
So the plant itself produces several hundred molecules, all of which we'd love to eventually be able to study with a little bit more depth than we can do currently, of course. But we do have a that combination of those terpenes plus the full batch of cannabinoids that is within any of these plants, it gives you the most synergistic effect. Now, in our program, since we have to extract everything, you're going to lose some of that along the way. For the most part, we are focusing on THC, CBD, because those are what we find most prevalent in the plant, what we can extract the easiest, and what we can actually put into products that can get efficacious dosing. But then we'll also go back, at least for some of our products, and add those terpenes back. Again, it's not every single thing that the plant provides, so we lose some of that along the extraction and purification routes, but we can get pretty darn close. And so, for instance, for some of our vape products, you're able to get those terpenes added back in and get closer to the full impact of the plant.
What about CBM? Can you put that in a product?
So we can, yep. All we have to do, obviously, we have to be able to get it. We have to be able to extract it. And then we have to declare it as far as our labeling. And then it goes onto the label. You'll have your same amount of dosing that you would have described there. And that can go into any of the product types available as well.
And the medical products you sell at Bud and Mary's in Windsor Heights you have some with CBM?
We do have some with CBN, yes, and
And I'm sorry, is it N like Nancy?
yes,
not
like Nancy.
M. Okay,
N,
sorry.
yes,
CBN.
correct.
Okay.
And we've actually got a couple. Again, if you go back to the design of what the hemp program that we talked about earlier, it was really aimed at all these other molecules, not THC. Now, again, it kind of changed over the course of time, but a molecule like CBN is available if you breed for plants, is available in a much higher quantity. And so there are some hemp farmers out there that are growing for CBN, that are extracting and solely focused on that molecule. So we're actually able to carry a couple products that they do come from out of state. They come through this hemp route, but they're almost 100% pure CBN.
Gotcha.
So you're able to get that.
So hemp products can cross state line legally?
They can, yes.
Gotcha. But THC products cannot.
The medical and adult use ones cannot. And this is one of the craziest parts about all this, is that right now, I guarantee you, driving up and down I-80, there are probably THC drinks in a truck that came from hemp. And because they came from hemp, they can cross state lines.
Okay.
Our products, though, can't. If we left the state with them, we're committing felonies, and we better get back in Iowa quick.
Okay. Well, let's transition a little bit more to the medical indications and the benefits, why the law went into effect. So my recollection in 2017 was it was the mayor of West Des Moines, and he and his wife have a daughter, and the daughter was a child at the time and had epilepsy.
Yes.
Seizure disorder, and that was one of the first medical indications for medical cannabis, and it also makes a good story to get the a good publicity and get the heart beating and wanting it. So ironically, you've got a Republican legislature and a Republican governor that historically are less lenient toward these sorts of things than a Democrat, but it happened under a Republican administration, and it was a mayor's daughter with a seizure disorder. I think that kind of got the whole process going.
It did.
The same thing was happening around the country, but that's what happened.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it was one of those situations where he and his family were willing to admit publicly, I am going across state lines. I'm committing crime, technically, going out to Colorado, but this is what I'm going to do for my daughter, and I would do anything to try to improve her situation.
So let's start with seizure disorders. So that's one of the indications. And we already mentioned that the two main chemicals are CBD and THC. And if you go into Bud & Mary's at Windsor Heights with your medical card, we're also going to talk about the process. Number one, a doctor doesn't prescribe the product. A doctor verifies that a patient has one of the conditions that the state of Iowa says is a condition that allows individuals to purchase the medical cannabis. The doctor doesn't prescribe the medical cannabis. The doctor just says, these are the conditions that the state says you have to be able to buy medical cannabis. I verify that you have this condition. And then the patient, and now you can do it all online and get it all within a day, pays $100 to the state of Iowa to get a card that is the medical cannabis card that they can take to any one of the 5 dispensaries in the state.
Correct.
And when they come to the dispensary with the card, what happens?
So from there, if it's your first visit, we'd like to do an intake and have a quick conversation, go over products, go over patient's history, go over conditions that they're looking to treat, what they were certified for to get into the program. Admittedly, some people have more history with this plant and these molecules than others. We're there to make sure we can guide as much or provide as much info as someone may need. Some people walk in, they've maybe experienced from other state, they live somewhere else that had a program, they know precisely what they're looking for. You can right from that point, go make your selection, make your purchase, and get on out of there. But we've got a full team that will also sit with you for as long as we need, as long as you need, in order to help make an informed decision, and then also help to kind of guide, hey, when you get home, this is what we would recommend. This is what we see, with patients who are typical of your condition. But it does impact us all slightly differently, not unlike medicine in other forms. So from that standpoint, there is a little bit of, hey, this is what we would expect, but also make sure that you're starting out at the lowest dose possible and potentially needing to build up a little bit from there if that's what it requires.
Yep. So they sit down and they go over what's the indication for them to have the card, but probably also other symptoms. So this is a cancer education series, and I would say, just put it out that my understanding of the literature, and I welcome you to challenge anything I say, but I don't promote it to patients as something to treat their cancer, but as something that can be helpful with either the symptoms that are caused by cancer or the side effects of the anti-cancer medicine.
100% right.
So we're not promoting it as something that helps control the cancer, but helps quality of life by controlling symptoms. We already talked about seizure disorders, which is not a common cancer phenomenon, as one of the indications, but others are control of pain, and it could be neuropathic pain or pain from the cancer, or it could be what we call myalgias and arthralgias, aches and pains that some anti-estrogen medications are known for. It can be for anxiety, depression, insomnia. It can be for post-traumatic stress symptoms. What are some of the other common symptoms that medical cannabis has been shown to be effective for?
Pain is definitely the first thing we see the most. We have, regardless of what the condition may be that is causing it, or the treatment, or the other drugs and whatnot, pain is number one on that list. In addition to epilepsy and those seizure disorders, we also see really good benefits for some of our patients with MS and other neurological diseases,
Right.
of course.
Spasticity is very effective.
Yes. PTSD, absolutely. Unfortunately, that is the third most common in Iowa that we see in our program that people are certified for. So pain, cancer, and then PTSD after that. And that ability to just sort of calm the system down really does seem to provide a really nice impact for people with PTSD, but also with some of those other, anxiety and that type of those types of situations. Beyond that, we do have a couple other conditions that are allowed in Iowa, HIV being one. But again, what we're going to see in that situation is mostly people dealing with pain or other symptoms.
Right.
From
it's not treating the
Correct.
Virus. It's managing some of the symptoms or side effects.
And the big catch-all we always say is, regardless of what your condition is, medical cannabis is not going to solve that. But what we can be is a tool in the toolkit for dealing with the symptoms, for dealing with other impacts that the other treatments may have. That's where we think, it's where literature shows, and that's where our experience shows that we're going to have the most impact for people. But we're certainly not in any of those diseases going to be able to solve them.
Another symptom of cancer, especially advanced cancer, is anorexia or decreased appetite.
Yes.
And that's another symptom that THC and CBD. So again, we're talking about those two chemicals, a little bit about CBN. But with the THC and CBD, you have products with varying proportions.
Correct.
I don't know if you have 100% THC, 100% CBD, but you have kind of everything in between. Of those symptoms that we mentioned, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail for which ones are better treated by a THC-enriched product versus those that tend to be benefited by the CBD products?
So the neurological conditions, like we mentioned, the epilepsy, seizure conditions, MS, those we typically see a higher dose of CBD being the most successful for our patients. When we're talking about pain, especially when we're talking about sleep, sometimes that is where we're going to see THC come into play. Now, for some patients, it is a high dose of THC, potentially, say, at night. And it's a big mix of those two molecules during the day. What CBD can do is it can, I would say, sort of diminish the effects of THC. So, for instance, the head buzz that is common that people feel, for our patients, for what we're trying to accomplish here, really that's kind of a side effect. It's not something we necessarily want. And so CBD in conjunction with THC can get you the pain relief benefit, but maybe if you experience that bit of head high that you can get from THC, CBD can help really tamp that down. So that's, a very, again, high level how we would approach. Again, each person is a little different, but, typically, again, in that inflammatory type state, CBD is going to show a lot of benefits. And then if we're talking full body pain, we're talking need to get to sleep, we're talking the appetite, increasing that appetite for patients, that's going to be more on the THC side.
So you mentioned some of the properties of THC that make it attractive in the recreational world, but probably also have some safety concerns, whether it's operating heavy equipment or, trying to function in the day, doing complex mental acuity. Have we seen in Iowa any uptick in safety-related issues because of not just the medical marijuana, probably more commonly because of the recreational products?
I would have to think across the board we probably have. Now, nothing that gets reported back through our program indicates that that's the case. But with the states around us, with hemp out there, and just the more common nature of it, I got to think that there are probably those types of situations. This is also why we are so precise with our warnings of, hey, to the extent possible, which hopefully is the case for most of our patients, go home. Let's use this in a controlled environment, in a space where you don't have to be doing those types of things, because just being in the medical program is not a get out of jail free card for your employer or for, driving while impaired or anything like that, if that's the impact it has on you. So yes, it is there again as a tool, but it is not, go bonkers, do anything you want under while you're using those products. So it's important for all of our patients, again, to the extent possible, that, hey, take this at home so you know how it's going to impact you. That's why we also suggest starting at those lower doses so you can understand what it might do. Some people don't get that head feeling I was mentioning, but for those that do, we want to make sure that they're in an environment where they're not operating machinery or, try to do a deep thinking job.
So since it is a medical product, and since you are a lawyer by background, do you give individuals guidance about how or if they share this medical product with employers, physicians, family? Do you have any guidance that you give them, especially, I guess, that the world of employment?
Yeah. So, for whatever reason, there's a clause that ended up in our statute that the employers in Iowa, they don't have to give you any sort of deference for the fact that you're in the program. Producing your card because something happened at work is not going to get you anywhere. We do talk to our patients about that, especially the ones that ask. The other big question we get, especially in our Sioux City location, is, hey, is this going to show up on a drug test? What's going to happen to me? And the answer to that is yes, it will show up. It is THC. That is exactly what those drug tests are for. And so for those folks that have to maintain a CDL, for instance, they're in trucking or other logistics and whatnot, have to drive for their job, this is not something they should be doing. Very clear on that. Also very clear on, hey, yes, the law doesn't require you to share anything that you're doing with providers or employers. We don't necessarily take a stance on if you should share it with your employer, but certainly with your provider, we think it does make sense to share that information so that you get that full picture of what's going on with treatment, with your conditions, with your situation. As it relates to family, obviously, choose to let whoever know. Certainly don't give anyone anything is obviously our guidance unless they are also a patient. But even saying that, the way our law is set up, if you and I are both patients, the products that I buy are going to be tied to me, and the products that you buy are tied to you. And so if it ever came up that there is a situation where, I had purchased a cream, you had it on you, but you hadn't purchased that, in theory, you're now not protected anymore by the law. Whether that would ever actually occur in practice, probably not. But again, it is meant to be, this is what you have done, and this is what you're protected from. Other beyond that, you're taking a bigger risk.
I do want to get to questions because I know we're going to have a lot of them. We haven't touched on the products that you sell in the medical space. So maybe describe what the products are, what's the, as we would say in the medical world, route of administration, which routes of administration work most quickly, and maybe characterize those different products for us.
So all of this is guided by what's allowed within the statute and the rules in Iowa. So there are some product types that people might be familiar with and see in other states, even can see in the consumable hemp program, that are not allowed in the medical program. Just the way it is right now.
No gummies.
No gummies, which still blows my mind in a lot of ways because we are allowed tablets. We are allowed tincture. Tablets exactly as they sound. Just a tablet that you pop into your mouth. It is going to have truly the same impact that a gummy is. You're just not going to chew it. Tincture is an oil drop. Probably people familiar with it, but something that you can drop on your tongue, or you could put into food or into a liquid. That is one of our most precise dosing. I mean, we can get down to literally what a drop is. So for some people, that works out really, really well because you can be extremely precise. Where if we go back to our tablet for a second, you're talking about usually a 5, a 10, or a 20 milligram dose. Now, yes, you could cut it up, and it is homogeneous. We do tests for that. But nonetheless, it's a little harder to cut a small tablet into quarters, where that's what the tincture
and that you
comes
swallow just like you would any pill.
Correct. You're not chewing it.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have a cream, and that cream is topical, so it doesn't get into the bloodstream. Nonetheless, again, going back to your question about employment, we would certainly not suggest someone get into the program, apply the cream, and then, feel confident with 100% certainty that they wouldn't,
So do you think the cream works where you put it, or that it gets absorbed and it works systemically?
No, it really works where you put it. That is what we have seen across all the time that we've been manufacturing it. That is how it was
for
designed.
pain or arthritis.
Correct. We see a lot of people with finger joints, very, very high level will say, hey, if you can point to it and it only hurts there, might be an option for you. Again, depending on what the source is. So we've got that product available. We've got a product that we call the Mix, and this is a patented product that we developed with our Colorado research team. And this is a water-soluble powder. Right now, we offer it just with THC, but as it sounds, water-soluble powder, you can dump that into any sort of liquid. You can also mix it into food. It is actually active as it is. So you think a Crystal Light packet, if it would be a little dry and grainy.
So you could put it in a Duncan Hines brownie mix.
Yes, sir. You certainly could.
Okay.
You certainly could. And frankly, I mean, this is a path to, hey, if I'm the person who would like to take an edible from another state, you can't here in Iowa, but we've got, you're gonna have to work for it a little bit, but we've got an option for you. And then last other big category, of course, is our inhalable. And so we have vape cartridges, again, what you would inhale. And then we also have a more concentrated product that can provide an even higher dose. And that is basically the plant, when it gets extracted, it comes out in a crystal form. And that is that raw crystal that you can heat up and vaporize. Again, we're not smoking, that's not
I thought
allowed.
you had to do it in oil.
So that step, it's kind of interesting. Along the way, that is how the plant comes, or that is how the extracted product comes out of our one of our extraction types. And it's a pretty common product in other states. And we actually worked with our regulator to say, hey, the consumption method that's allowed, and that's where it is defined within our law, is inhalation through vaporization. That's how you consume this product. Is this allowed? And a little bit of back and forth, but we came to the agreement that it was. And so we were able to launch that product about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. It's almost a crystallized form of the oil.
In your vape products, though, I assume there's a carrier.
There is.
Yeah.
What that carrier is, though, is those terpenes. So the compound I mentioned before that came out of the plant. At this point, those are the only two things or the only two big categories you'll see. You've got the cannabinoids, so THC, CBD, and then you've got our terpenes. And that mix, that blend, is what goes into those vape cartridges.
So several years ago, when vaping was going, there was this popcorn lung effect. So there was thought that certain vape products, and you will probably know better than I, they were debating over exactly what it was that was causing the lung damage. Did that ever get resolved? And do you have concern that the vaping products, if not the THC and CBD, but the carrier, could cause lung damage?
So what you're referencing was the predominant carrier being used there was vitamin E acetate. Absolutely not something you should ever inhale. And what people were doing, I think it was north of 90% of the folks who suffered from that popcorn lung and dealt with those situations, they were buying black market material. What we were seeing in the black market at that time was that people were trying to get their actual THC to go further. So they were cutting it with vitamin E acetate. Well, once you inhale that, extremely damaging to your lungs. What our industry, whether you're talking adult use or med, across the country did is start to ban all of those other carriers. And I'm glad they did, because what it should offer, what it hopefully offers, is confidence that going into the legalized program within Iowa or any of these other states, you're going to get something that you know has not been cut with that. And that's why within our mix, all you're going to see is terpenes and the THC that we've extracted in that oil form. So look, at the end of the day, we obviously have got to be honest that putting anything into your lungs does have its risks. But again, what our position on this has always been is obviously don't cut it with that nasty stuff and do anything like that. But it's a cost benefit analysis, right? You're going to get some benefit from inhalation, especially going back to the amount of time. It's going to be much quicker onset. It's going to be a little bit shorter duration, but you're going to get it and feel almost instant there.
So is it faster than a tincture?
It is. It is. Anything that's going to get absorbed through your metabolic system is going to take some more time. We see with our tablets, for instance, that we're looking at usually 30 to 60-minute onset, but your duration will be longer. With vape, with our inhalable products, I mean, it can be 5 to 10 minutes for some patients, but it's not going to last nearly as long. You're going to see potentially up to like an hour, maybe most.
Okay. I have one more question, then we're going to open up to you guys, so get ready. I assume you don't make a product where you light something on fire and you inhale smoke.
Correct. We are not allowed to in Iowa.
Gotcha. You operate in some states where you make recreational products.
Correct.
Is that sold in recreational stores?
That is sold in recreational stores. Pretty common way. I think it obviously harkens back to the way a lot of people grew up with this. And, I think whether you look across, it is somewhat interesting. You look across these other states, you look across ours, the average person in most of these state programs is going to be around 50 years old. I think there is a level of familiarity with that type of consumption. I do think as we look out into the future, you'll start to see that wean, and that, we talk about, the next generation probably not consuming in that method.
Yeah. So as a physician, we oppose lighting something on fire and inhaling smoke. That's if you do that enough, you're going to get lung cancer.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
you will.
Regardless of what you smoke. So let's open up the questions. We've got a large live studio audience here, so you'll get first question. And try to make them quick and brief so we can get through because we only got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, you got me at talking about what you put in animals' food, and I'm a cat lady. So,
All right.
ultimate question: what is in catnip?
Well, what I can tell you is there's at least one chemical molecule that is helping it stay fresh. Beyond that, that I can't help you with.
Because it can make them hyper and then make them really relaxed.
Maybe a couple little molecules might be sipping
so.
in there, huh?
I think we should take that back and see, is there potentially something in catnip you guys can
maybe
figure out and give to a sleepy person getting ready to go to work?
Yeah, hype them up a little bit.
I will advise if you try to put it in a candle, the crush version, thinking you're going to relax the cat and you get to do some work in the house, doesn't work. My husband came home from work and I was out with the cats too. So just a warning.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is there any other side effects of using TCB or CD? And also, is this available in all 50 states, or are there still some states that are holding out?
There are still some states that are holding out. Some of our neighbors, in fact, Nebraska, Kansas, those states don't have official programs. My home state of Indiana does not have official programs.
Can you still buy CBD?
But you could buy CBD and you could buy hemp-based things. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about some of the unwanted side effects of THC and or CBD.
Yeah, so on CBD, we do see it is processed through at least a part with liver. So for people that have liver diseases or taking drugs that are otherwise hard on the liver, we do recommend a little bit further consultation with your provider to just make sure that there's not going to be negative interactions there. With THC, I mentioned kind of that head feeling. We do note, or we do at least advise, that some people can have a bit of sleepiness, grogginess, that they can have the potential fall. Again, it does depend on the situation and how high your dose is, those sorts of things. But those are some of the watch outs we have for people, at least at the beginning of their time taking these products.
Okay. Next.
Can THC or CBD products treat Parkinson's disease?
Yes. So typically we do have patients with Parkinson's, the mix of CBD and THC or the more CBD heavy products that we have seem to work the best. Again, I think back to where the source of that disease comes from. But yes, we do have some patients with Parkinson's that have seen some really solid results. Again, mostly from the CBD side of the equation.
Okay. Next, Brad.
Yeah, I was curious about the CBN. So do you sell that exclusively, or is that exclusively for sleep issues that doesn't have THC or CBD in it?
So we do, and it is the best indication. CBN has been fairly lightly studied, to be honest with you, but sleep seems to be its number one benefit so far. Again, I won't pretend like it's gone through years of clinical work or anything like that. But yes, we do sell a pure CBN product, and again, sleep is the way that we discuss with our patients the benefits that you're going to see.
Do you have to
Require a medical card is required?
The 100% pure one would not, because again, it's going to be derived from hemp and it's going to come in through that program. So no medical card required on that side.
You can get that in the front part of your store.
Correct, exactly.
Without a medical card,
Exactly.
the CBN. And then if you were going to use a medical product, you might combine it with some THC.
Correct. Exactly.
And then you have to have the medical
And
card.
we do have a product that has CBD, CBN, and THC in it. Again, that's going to require the medical card, but that is something that we certainly recommend if people are having sleep issues. That's one of the go-tos to work through that.
Just to follow up, that was interesting to me. So some people would come into the store that don't even have a medical card.
Correct. Yes. And it's open to the public. You can cruise in there just to chat and hang out and see it if you want. Just over by Walmart there in Windsor Heights.
And you do have some of the products that you could buy at other stores.
Correct.
At the front part. of the
We do.
store. But I'm interested some more in that CBN. Does that show up on a med screen?
So, for the most part, my knowledge is that most of the panels are going to be looking at THC specifically. If you're looking for THC specifically, it will not. Now, the problem we get into is that different laboratories have different levels of expertise, obviously, on that, and it'll send a peak up. And if you don't know what you're looking at, I suppose you probably run the risk of, ooh, we don't know, so we're going to flag you anyway. But it is not, it is a completely separate molecule than THC.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of expanding on that CDN, which I never heard of that before. But as a sleep aid, would the CBD or CBN or a combination or
Just to do the spelling right, I think it's CBD
CBD?
and CBN.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So again, some of it is going to go back ultimately to what is causing the potential sleep issue. But for the most part, what we have seen, it is obviously anecdotal, kind of observational from our work, but that mixture of the three that I referenced that we sell in a tablet form seems to have the best impact. Now, we do get really good results for our patients that are taking just THC. And what we've theorized, again, I can't say that we've done clinical research to prove this, but what our theory is that THC and CBN are working in conjunction to both help you fall asleep, but then also stay asleep. Now, again, I can't back that up with any sort of literature to prove that, but that's at least we have a PhD researcher on our team, and that is his kind of general concept as to why that is happening. We do, again, though, see good benefit for people just taking THC by itself for sleep.
So, Lucas, is it legal to do a clinical trial in Iowa with assuming that all of the people on the clinical trial have valid medical cards?
So we have actually been working on this path with the University of Iowa. I would admit it has been slower than even I expected it to be. So we're not over the hump yet, but we are trying to get precisely that done, where you'd have to be in the program. You would kind of have to go to the dispensary and get a very precise product. You'd have no, obviously, choice in that. Some people would be getting the actual product, and then some would be getting placebo, but still a lot to work out on that front. There are pathways to do that with the federal government, but navigating that right now is about as challenging as anything we do.
Right.
So
Because nobody's working right now.
correct. That also presents a big
Nobody's
problem.
answering phones. Nobody's responding. Okay. Next question. Ron.
Been is dispensaries in out of state, and they advertise certain strands of cannabis that are more sleepy and more active. And I guess you are developing both strands.
So the old history here that sativa strains or sativa dominant plants were going to be the one that hyped you up, right? That gave you the energy, and the indica leading plants were going to be the ones that are put you in the couch and make you fall asleep and that type of thing. Sativa, indica, what is also called hybrid, those are the three main dominances. All that is shorthand for essentially what the combination of cannabinoids and terpenes are within that plant. And so if you go pull those plants apart and you look at them chemically, what you see is that some of those terpenes that are a little bit more sedating or relaxing, you're going to find a higher prevalence of those in what is referred to as indica, and some of those more uplifting, or at least, again, what we can observe anecdotally and observationally, those more uplifting terpenes are going to be found more prevalent in those sativa strains. Honestly, at this point, across most of the states that exist that have programs, it's a little bit of shorthand. A lot of stuff has been bred together. And so what it really is what that is telling you is what type of terpenes might be there, but it's not a perfect, say, every single thing that says indica is actually indica out there, at least across the country. So certainly what we would say in that situation is maybe talk to the person behind the counter a little bit more to make sure you're getting what you think you are.
We have time for one more question. Here we go.
How about CBG?
So the precursor to all cannabinoids, that is also one of those that is available in its pure form from the hemp program. It does show up a little bit in some of the genetics that we grow, and so we do have very small amounts of it. The problem we have with that molecule is that I can't point really to any literature, any observational work, really anything that would give me a solid, or our team a solid basis to say this is what it'll do for you. It does seem to have some benefits, but this is extremely anecdotal. And so for that reason, it is available out there in the world, but it's hard to say use that molecule for this particular indication or this particular symptom because we don't have much to back that up on.
If somebody wanted that, they could purchase that at Bud and Mary's.
They could. I think we still got one of our purified CBG forms a little.
And that would be in the.
But it'd be on the hemp side of
recreational, on
things.
the hemp
Yeah,
side without
exactly.
the need for the medical
Exactly.
card. Well, I'm sorry, we're out of time. So we're definitely going to have you back again.
Love to.
And this has been really, really good, very informative. Our guest tonight has been Lucas Nelson. He is the group president for Bud and Mary's. We've been talking about medical cannabis. If you're watching us tonight and you know someone that would benefit by watching this program, good news, it's going to be available on demand beginning tomorrow at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel or the Mercy Cancer Center website. I hope you'll join us again next week. Thanks, everyone.